freaking out. My husband found out that the child isn't his and took brutal revenge.
Freaking out. Apparently the kid isn't his. He threw all my stuff out of our house. I need help. Hello, Redditors, a longtime user and fan of this platform, but I've never really had a need to come on here. I am coming on here now because I desperately need advice. I just got kicked out of the house by my husband after he found out that the chat wasn't his. It was a one-time mistake, and I really didn't know how to remedy it. I know you're probably wondering what happened, so let me give you some backstory first. My name is Felicia, and I am a 30-year-old woman. I have been married to my husband, Robin, who is a 32-year-old man for 5 years now. Robin and I met on a dating site. He was very charming, and I instantly got attracted. We dated for a few years before deciding to get married. It was a whirlwind romance, but I never felt that it went too fast. Robin is the exact opposite of me. He is handsome, charming, and ambitious. He has a magnetic personality that draws people towards him effortlessly. He is a successful architect, while I, on the other hand, am a complex character. I am intelligent and warm, but I have insecurities and vulnerabilities, and I am not as popular or as charming as Robin. I was cautious about trying online dating, not knowing what to expect. But Robin's profile caught my eye right away. He seemed really friendly and confident. Our chats were easy, and I felt like we clicked, even through the screen. When we finally met in person, I was drawn to Robin's outgoing personality. He made me feel special, like I was the center of his attention. But deep down, I could tell he had his own insecurities too, which made me feel closer to him. Our relationship just felt right from the start. We enjoyed simple things together, like stealing glances across the room or having heart-to-heart talks. But sometimes I worried that I wasn't as outgoing or impressive as Robin. Despite my doubts, I knew we had something special. I admired Robin's drive and ambition, and he appreciated me for who I was, flaws included. Together, we faced life's challenges with love and support. From the moment we started dating, it was clear that Robin was on a successful path. As an architect, he brought in a steady income, while I pursued my passion as an artist, which unfortunately didn't bring in much money. Robin didn't mind covering the bills. He was just glad to see me doing what I loved. However, his demanding job meant he was often away, leaving me feeling isolated and alone. Despite his best efforts, the loneliness crept in, casting a shadow over our otherwise happy relationship. Having a heart-to-heart with Robin about feeling lonely was tough. He was doing his best juggling work and our relationship, but with him being the main breadwinner, his job kept him away a lot. One night, when Robin was out again for the weekend and I was feeling really low, I ended up at a bar alone. That's where I met John. We hit it off right away, and with a few drinks in me, things got out of hand and we had sex. The next morning, regret hit me hard, and I promised myself never to drink like that again. The idea of coming clean to Robin scared me. I was terrified of hurting him or messing up what we had. So I kept it to myself, hoping I could bury the guilt and move on. I loved Robin too much to lose him, and I knew I would lose him if I ever came clean. The fear of losing Robin was overwhelming, and the thought of confessing filled me with dread. I cherished him deeply and couldn't bear the idea of him walking away because of my mistake. So I made a decision to keep my indiscretion a secret, locking it away deep within me. When John expressed interest in seeing each other again, I shut him down immediately. I made it clear that what happened was a mistake, fueled by alcohol and loneliness, and that I was committed to my relationship with Robin. I hoped that by distancing myself from John, I could bury the memory of that night and move forward. Months passed, and just as life seemed to settle back into a semblance of normalcy, I discovered I was pregnant. I was absolutely horrified when I found out I was pregnant. It felt like my world was crumbling around me. I had been so consumed with the fear of Robin finding out about my infidelity that I completely forgot to take my birth control pill. Deep down, I knew the baby was likely John's, but admitting that to Robin was out of the question. I loved him too much to risk losing him, so I made the gut-wrenching decision to lie and tell him the baby was his. To my surprise, Robin was over the moon when I shared the news with him. His joy was infectious, and he wasted no time in proposing to me. In just a few months, we were married. Despite the whirlwind of happiness surrounding our wedding, guilt gnawed at me relentlessly. I knew I was deceiving Robin, but I convinced myself that it was for the greater good. After all, telling him the truth would have shattered our happiness and torn our family apart. Our honeymoon was like a dream come true, with Robin sparing no expense to make it unforgettable. Despite the challenges of pregnancy, including morning sickness and hormonal swings, Robin was my rock, supporting me every step of the way. His excitement for the baby only intensified my guilt, knowing deep down that the child wasn't his. But the reality of our situation weighed heavily on me. Robin was not only the love of my life, but also my lifeline. He provided for us financially, and without him, I would struggle to make ends meet. The thought of losing him was unbearable, so I buried my guilt and focused on preserving our marriage. Meanwhile, John's attempts to reach out only added to my stress. Each time he tried to contact me, I shut him down, refusing to entertain the possibility of him being the father. I reassured myself that the lie was necessary to protect my marriage and our future as a family. Soon the baby came. He was so cute, and I am going to call him Felix for the sake of privacy. The first few months with Felix were a wild ride of joy and exhaustion. He was a healthy, adorable little guy, and everyone couldn't get enough of him. Robin was over the moon about having a son, and he stepped up big time to help me out. He even dialed back his work hours to be around more, which made all the difference. With Robin's help and support from our families, we got through those tough early days. But as Felix started growing up a bit, I started feeling a bit restless. Don't get me wrong, being a stay-at-home mom was great, but I needed something more. The days at home were starting to blend together, and I missed the challenge of work. So I decided I'd go back to work once Felix was a bit older, maybe around 2 or 3 years old. It wasn't an easy choice, but I knew it was the right one for me. Plus, a break from diapers and baby talk sounded pretty good right about then. Things were great for a while, however. As Felix grew, it became clear to everyone that he didn't quite resemble Robin. The whispers started when he was around a year old, and by the time he was a little over a year, it was hard to ignore. I couldn't shake off the worry that had plagued me during pregnancy. Deep down, I'd prayed that Felix wouldn't take after John in looks. I knew there was no chance he'd look like Robin, but I hoped he'd take after me enough to throw people off the scent. Unfortunately, Felix ended up resembling me a lot, but with a strong resemblance to John, too. It didn't take long for everyone to notice the stark contrast between Felix and Robin. Felix's red hair stuck out like a sore thumb against the backdrop of Robin's blonde locks and my own black hair. It was a real head-scratcher for everyone, including me. I didn't really get how genetics worked, but I was crossing my fingers that Felix would end up with hair like mine or Robin's. But fate had other plans, and Felix ended up with fiery red hair, just like John. As Felix got older, his red hair became the talk of the town, sparking questions about where he got it from. I was relieved when Robin didn't seem bothered by Felix's red hair. He reassured me, saying he knew Felix was his son, no matter the color of his hair. Robin even mentioned that his grandma had red hair, suggesting that might be where Felix got it from. His understanding and acceptance eased some of the worry I had been carrying then. It meant the world to me how Robin always had my back whenever Felix's appearance was questioned. One particular instance stands out, when a cousin of Robin's, who was visiting, couldn't help but comment on Felix's red hair. Instead of letting it become an awkward moment, Robin smoothly stepped in and explained that Felix probably inherited his red hair from their grandma. It was like a weight lifted off my shoulders as Robin defended me and diffused the situation with ease. What struck me most was how the cousin responded. Instead of dwelling on the differences, they praised genetics for its mysterious ways, highlighting how it could uncover hidden traits and bring surprises into the world. It was a reminder that sometimes what makes us unique is also what makes life beautiful. As Felix turned 2, I found myself considering a return to work. I didn't want anything too stressful, but rather something flexible that would still allow me plenty of time with Felix. Remote work wasn't appealing since I was itching to get out of the house. I started browsing job listings, but I wasn't in any rush. Robin, on the other hand, wasn't thrilled about the idea of me going back to work. With his income now higher than before, he didn't see the need for me to work outside the home. I sat down with Robin and laid it all out, explaining why I felt the need to go back to work. Unlike him, I didn't have a wide circle of friends. Robin was the social butterfly, effortlessly charming everyone he met, while I was more of a lone wolf with few connections outside our family. With Felix to care for, my world had become even smaller, especially on days when Robin was away for work. The loneliness weighed heavy on me, and I missed him dearly. The four walls of our home started to feel suffocating, and I yearned for a change of scenery. There was nobody to invite me on girls' night out or to invite me outside for drinks. It was just me. And even though I enjoyed the loneliness, they were days, it felt suffocating. Going back to work wasn't just about earning money. It was about reclaiming a sense of independence and purpose outside the confines of our home. It was a way for me to break free from the isolation and monotony and to feel like I was contributing something meaningful to the world beyond our family and feeling like I was more than just a mom. Robin agreed with me and even apologized for the loneliness I had been feeling. He said he felt genuinely sorry and assured me he was doing his best. I told him there was no need to apologize because, truth be told, I felt sorry too. Robin was putting in long hours at work to provide for us, and he was doing an excellent job of it. After Felix was born, we upgraded to a bigger house with a home theater and a swimming pool. However stupid John just wouldn't leave me alone, it was frustrating, to say the least. He had been persistent in trying to meet up, and I decided to entertain him this time just to put an end to it for good. Instead of blocking him as I usually did, I responded to his text. We agreed to meet outside of town to avoid being recognized. When we met, I made it clear to John that there was no way Felix could be his child. I explained that Felix was Robin's and that I had taken the morning after pill after that night. John tried to defend himself by pointing out Felix's red hair, claiming it was like his. I warned him that I would involve the police if he continued to harass us. I asked if he had been stalking us, but he denied it, saying he had only seen us at places like the store or the park. I reminded him that red hair ran in Robin's family, making it clear once and for all that Felix wasn't his child. I told him to stop worrying me and explained the situation thoroughly so he wouldn't bother me again. I even mentioned that I had done a DNA test, which finally convinced him to drop it. John apologized for bothering me and assured me he didn't mean to come off as creepy. He was just curious, and if Felix had been his child, he would have wanted a place in their life. I reiterated that Felix wasn't his child and that he shouldn't worry me any further. Then I left. With Felix at his grandparents' and Robin heading to work, it was just me at home. I understood Robin's stress, especially dealing with demanding clients at work. When he suggested I take a break and go out the next day while he stayed home with Felix, I was thrilled. It was rare for Robin to have a free day, and even rarer for him to insist I take time for myself. Since I didn't have many friends to hang out with, most days it was just me and Felix at home, so the prospect of having a day to myself was incredibly exciting. The next day, Robin handed me his credit card and encouraged me to treat myself to some pampering. He planned to take Felix to the park for some quality father-son time. I seized the opportunity and indulged in a day of self-care. I treated myself to a spa session, got my nails done, and even refreshed my hair. It felt like a luxury to have some time just for me, and I savored every moment of it. Returning home, Felix was in high spirits, and he excitedly babbled about his day with Robin at the park, and Robin told me about how he had enjoyed pizza. We spent some time watching TV together, had dinner, and then settled down for bed. However, over the next few days, I noticed Robin's irritability creeping back in. I attributed it to his usual work stress and didn't think much of it at first. As Robin's irritability worsened, he began directing it towards me, which was deeply unsettling. His behavior worsened to the point where he wouldn't interact with Felix much. Communication became strained, with Robin shutting down and refusing to engage in conversation. Despite my attempts to address the issue, Robin insisted that everything was fine and attributed his behavior to work-related stress. This pattern continued for several days, leaving me feeling increasingly concerned and isolated. Despite my attempts to address the issue, Robin insisted that everything was fine and attributed his behavior to work-related stress. This pattern continued for several days, leaving me feeling increasingly concerned and isolated. Feeling concerned about Robin's behavior, I decided to seek help from his parents, who were always understanding and supportive. After discussing it with Robin, we agreed that I would visit them in a few days' time. Robin was fine with the plan, and Robin even encouraged us to go, wanting a day to himself. The next day, Felix and I got ready and headed to his parents' house. It was a pleasant visit, filled with warm conversation and reassurances that Robin's behavior was likely just work-related stress. Felix enjoyed playing there, and his grandparents showered him with affection. After spending several hours there, I realized it was getting late and decided to head home to prepare dinner. However, when I arrived, I was shocked to find not only my belongings on the porch, but also Felix's belongings, indicating that something was seriously wrong. Feeling bewildered and scared, I stood frozen as I stared at my and Felix's belongings strewn on the porch. Why had Robin thrown them out? My heart was racing with confusion and anxiety as I desperately tried calling him, but he refused to answer. Resorting to banging on the door, I hoped my neighbors wouldn't call the cops for the noise. After what felt like an eternity, Robin cracked the door open just enough to peek out and ask what I wanted. I was taken aback. What did he mean? I just wanted to come inside. I had returned from his parents' place feeling stressed, and Felix was tired and needed to sleep. The situation made no sense, and I couldn't understand why Robin was acting this way. However, I soon found out why he was acting this way. Robin looked me dead in the eye and told me he knew Felix wasn't his child. When Robin stared me down and said those words, it felt like my whole world collapsed. I wished I could just vanish into thin air. At first, I nervously chuckled, thinking he was pulling my leg, but his expression told me he was dead serious. He dropped the bombshell that he'd done a DNA test, proving Felix wasn't his biological child. It felt like a punch to the gut. Robin's calm voice contrasted with the fire burning in his eyes as he accused me of betraying him, of trying to pass off another guy's kid as his own. His words hit me like a ton of bricks, leaving me stunned and overwhelmed with guilt. I stood there. I was unable to find the right words, as Robin made it clear he never wanted to see me again. Standing there, still reeling from Robin's accusation, I watched as he walked back inside and closed the door. It felt like a punch to the gut, and I went through a whirlwind of emotions right then and there. I could feel the eyes of our nosy neighbors on me, but I didn't want to make a scene or become the talk of the town. I wanted to cry, scream, and beg all at once. But I knew there was no point in begging Robin for forgiveness. He was too stubborn, and I didn't want to subject myself to more humiliation. So I called an Uber to take me and Felix to my parents' house. Packing our things quickly, I left behind the home we had shared and headed for the comfort of my childhood home. Here I am, stuck in my room, feeling utterly defeated. I've been crying my eyes out for what seems like forever. Leaving Robin's place was tough, but now I'm completely falling apart. My folks are mad, of course, but there's not much they can do. They're talking about staging some kind of intervention, hoping to convince Robin to give me another chance. It sounds like a long shot, and honestly, I'm not sure if it'll make any difference. I can't shake this feeling of guilt and dread, knowing I've messed everything up. All I can do now is wait and hope for the best. It's tough right now because my parents are the only ones in my corner, willing to lend a hand. Earlier, I tried reaching out to Robin's parents, hoping they'd offer some support, but that backfired. They picked up the phone, only to give me an earful, making it crystal clear they were onto me. Their anger cut deep, especially since I genuinely cared for them. They'd always been so kind to me, and now I'd gone and betrayed their trust. The guilt weighs heavy on me, knowing I've let them down in such a big way. It's a painful realization that's hard to shake off. Another blow that hit me hard was discovering that Robin had emptied our joint account before I even reached my parents' place. Our joint account was our lifeline, where Robin would deposit money for bills, expenses, and my own needs, since I'm not working much as a stay-at-home mom. It was a major source of financial support for me. But to my shock and dismay, when I checked the account, it was drained completely. Every cent gone. It left me stranded, and I had to rely on my parents to even cover the cost of the Uber ride. It was a painful reminder of just how much damage had been done to our relationship. I honestly don't think Robin will ever forgive, but I can only hope. I need help in the form of advice or suggestions on how to approach Robin. Do you think he'll ever forgive me? Thanks for listening, though. Update. Hi, everyone. I know it's been a while since I last posted, and I honestly didn't expect to be back here. But seeing how much attention my last post received, I feel compelled to share another update with you all. A lot has happened in the past month, and I want to fill you in on the details. First of all, I want to share that Robin and I are sadly getting a divorce. As I mentioned earlier, my parents had promised to stage an intervention to help me mend things with Robin. We tried reaching out to him multiple times, but he refused to pick up, even when we called from a private number. So we decided to take matters into our own hands and headed over to his house, hoping to speak with him face to face. When we arrived at the house, to my relief, Robin was home. Despite the tension between us, he still had a soft spot for my parents because of how kind they had always been to him. So he graciously welcomed us inside, although he did shoot me a disapproving look. Nonetheless, he greeted my parents and my brother warmly and even offered them drinks. I was shocked to hear that. Robin wasn't supposed to know John. He must have noticed my surprise because he went on to explain. John had actually approached him before, claiming that he and I had sex and that he thought Felix was his. At first, Robin didn't believe him, knowing I usually stayed home. But John kept insisting that Felix was his child. As Robin started seeing similarities between John and Felix, he began to wonder if there was any truth to it. That's when he decided to do a DNA test to prove John wrong. I was speechless. There was no defense I could offer. Seeing that Robin wouldn't change his mind, my parents decided it was best to leave. Before we departed, Robin made it clear that divorce papers would be coming my way soon, and he wouldn't be paying child support. He even threatened to sue for paternal fraud to avoid it. I broke down, crying and pleading, but Robin remained unmoved. Eventually, my parents had to physically pull me away from Robin's house. They reminded me that I had brought this upon myself. This is everything that's happened. I'm still at my parents' place, and even though Felix senses something's off, he's too young to fully grasp it. Honestly, I blame John for everything. I'll never forgive him, and he won't ever have a say in Felix's life, no matter what. Thanks to everyone for their support. I just hope others don't make the same mistake I did. Feeling defeated doesn't even begin to describe it. How did I go from a life with luxuries like a home theater and a swimming pool back to my parents' house? Robin had gotten me used to that lifestyle, and now I'm back to square one. Getting back into the workforce after such a long break won't be easy. Thanks for listening, though. I guess it was nice while it lasted. Like my parents said, I brought this on myself.
I vowed that nothing will ever take me back to my estranged husband. I never wanted to have anything to do with him. I don't even want to breathe the same air with him. I didn't even want to set my eyes on him. I hated everything about him. My estranged husband is the perfect definition of a wolf in sheep's clothing. I left my husband while he was sick and took our daughter. Yes, I did it and I don't have any regrets. But before you judge me, please listen to my story. Hi guys, my name is Samantha and I'm a 31-year-old baker. Well, I just started a bakery recently. I couldn't really bake before, but that story is not necessary. I'm married to my estranged husband, Dennis. We got married 11 years ago, but we have been separated for 5 years now. We have a 10-year-old daughter. Her name is Elizabeth. She is the best thing that has ever happened to me. Elizabeth is my whole world. She is the reason I still have the will to live. I want to give her the best. I don't want her to suffer the way I suffered as a child. That's why I will go to any length to give everything. I can give her my whole life without thinking about it. My daughter and I suffered so much in the hands of Dennis. My marriage to Dennis was a total disaster. Dennis and I got married when I was 20 years old. My father sold me off to Dennis because he couldn't pay the debt he owed him. Dennis is a businessman and so is my father. They did a business deal together and it went bad, so my dad married me off to Dennis, or rather he sold me off to him. In exchange, his debt was cleared. After the marriage or the business transaction, Dennis made my life a living hell. Dennis and my dad made me sign and document that I was never going to get divorced no matter what. Don't blame me, I was naive and I didn't even know the gravity of what I was doing. When Dennis made the offer to my dad, initially, he refused, but my stepmom convinced him to accept the offer so they will be debt-free. I was so stupid that I didn't know that Dennis had used our ignorance to his advantage. Things like that only happened in movies. How could it be possible that someone would trap another person into a divorce and there'll be no way to get out of it? I know you all are shaking your head and laughing at the possibility of that. Trust me when I say that when I think about it now, I laugh too. I laugh at how funny it sounds. I believed that I was stuck in a bad marriage forever and there was nothing I could do about it. Unknown to me that I was actually wasting time and deceiving myself. Dennis was very smart and he used that to his advantage in the marriage. He saw a family that didn't make sense and then he decided to use that to his own silly game's advantage. I lost my mom when I was 2 years old, so my dad remarried. After their wedding, my stepmom made sure I experienced hell on earth. She hated me for reasons best known to her. My dad was not always around, that's why he remarried. I was very close to my dad, but he remarried, all of that changed. He became distant because my stepmom always quarreled with my dad anytime she saw us together. She never wanted to see me talk to my dad. If she ever caught me talking to my dad, I would be in trouble. She would punish me by not giving me food. This made me scared. I was afraid of going to my dad and he was afraid of coming to me because he didn't want to upset his new wife. She controlled everything, even down to my dad's finances. She was the one that squandered all my dad's business money. She wears the most expensive and trending outfit. That was why my dad was in debt. She mismanaged my dad's fiancé and I became the sacrificial lamb. Things became worse when she gave birth to my stepsister Alora. I was completely neglected by my dad. Alora became my dad's favorite. Growing up, Alora got the best of everything, while I got the one she abandoned. My stepmom never bought anything for me. I always got what Alora rejected. I grew up without the love of a father and mother. So don't be surprised when my dad agreed to me off to his business partner. After the wedding, reality set in. My marriage to Dennis was just like being in bondage. He treated me like a maid. I wasn't allowed into his room. He would ask me to go upstairs anytime his friends visited. He wasn't proud of me. He never allowed me to go out with him. He was ashamed of me, I guess. He had maids before we got married, but immediately after our marriage, he sacked them. I became the official maid. I was sweeping and mopping a big house with a lot of rooms. He also made sure I washed his cars every morning. After that, I prepared his food. He made sure I was occupied with work 24/7. I was so engaged with house chores that I didn't even have time to feel sorry for myself. I cried to bed every day. I thought marriage was like a bed of roses like I read in novels. Nothing prepared me for what I went through in the hands of Dennis. He never took care of me. He didn't buy new clothes or shoes. He told me I didn't need any of that because I was always at home. He never spent a dime on me. I was always sad. The more I tried to get his love and affection, the more he hated me. I was married but very lonely. Every weekend was always tough for me. Dennis would invite his friends over. They would party all weekend. They would drink, smoke, and litter the floor. I would be cleaning after them because Dennis would beat me if he found stains on his tiles or floor. Dennis has about 3 washing machines, but he made me wash with my bare hands. He frustrated me every chance I got. Dennis was a rich man. He had people doing all this for him before I came, but he sacked them immediately I came. That is why I don't regret leaving him while he was sick and taking our daughter with me. I was tired of the marriage even before it began. Dennis made sure I didn't have any money. He would send the gatekeeper out for grocery shopping. He never allowed me to do it. Maybe he was because he was scared of me taking his money and running away. One day I got tired of everything and I decided to run back to my dad's house. Unfortunately for me, my dad was not around. My stepmom chased me back and asked me never to return again, that I was already a married woman. She saw the bruises on my body, but she turned a blind eye to everything. I thought those types of things only happened in movies, but surprisingly, it happened to me too, and I was very surprised. After I was sent away by my stepmom, I didn't have anywhere else to go, so I decided to go back to Dennis' place. He wasn't around when I left, and thankfully he hasn't returned back yet. Then the worst thing happened. What I dreaded the most happened. Can you guys guess what it was? I found out that I was pregnant. I'd taken a pregnancy test after missing my monthly flow, but I never thought I'd really be pregnant. I was pregnant. Yes, guys, I was pregnant. I was so devastated because I couldn't believe I was pregnant with his child. I wasn't happy. It felt like my whole world was crumbling. I didn't know what to do. Worst of all, I didn't have a mother, no father, and no friends. Even if I had friends, he wouldn't allow them to visit. My dad tried visiting several times, but he never allowed him in. Anyone I've told this story today wouldn't believe it. It just sounds easy to leave such a situation. But for a woman like me with no money who was broke, leaving just like that was very hard. Children are gifts from God, so I didn't understand why Dennis was not happy when I told him I was pregnant. He was indifferent about it. I thought he would be happy when I told him I was pregnant, but the reverse was the case. I thought the news of my pregnancy was going to bring us together and he would start training me right. But I was wrong. The only thing he said is I should better hope I'm carrying a baby boy. All through my pregnancy, it was hell. The first trimester was the hardest. The morning sickness was extreme. I was still cleaning the entire house all by myself in that condition. Sometimes Dennis will return back from his business trips with his girlfriends, and he would ask me to cook and serve them. He always told them I was his maid. Some of them asked him to sack me because I was pregnant, that I was good for nothing. Remembering everything is making me tear up right now. I was scared of what would happen when Dennis finds out I'm carrying a girl. I already did an ultrasound, but I was scared. I couldn't tell him. I begged the doctor to keep the gender of the baby from Dennis, and the doctor reluctantly agreed. Denise continued to maltreat me all through the pregnancy. There was never a day he looked at me with love. Soon I found out why he hated me with passion. Apparently, my father cheated him on their business deal. That was why he hated me. He was transferring the hatred he had for my father to me. Maybe it was because I'm the exact replica of my father. I'm not making excuses for him. I'm just trying to understand why he hated me so much. I finally gave birth to my beautiful daughter on a Sunday. I felt joy I've never felt before. I couldn't explain what it was, but I was finally at peace. I felt some form of relief all of a sudden. For the first ever since I lost my mom, I never felt alone again. But I can't say the same for Dennis. He was so disappointed you could see it all over his face. He left me and the baby at the hospital. I spent 3 days at the hospital without anyone coming to see me. When the doctor got tired, he had to discharge me because I was occupying space and the bills were piling up. Honestly, I didn't want to leave the hospital. I was getting food at the hospital. The nurses were helping me with my baby when I was still in the hospital. Now it was just me and my little angel. I found it hard to move around because I had a cesarean section. The doctor and nurses warned me to get enough bed rest and that I shouldn't lift any heavy objects. I couldn't do that because I had no helping hands, which made my recovery journey hard. It took me 6 months to heal completely. That 6 months was hard for me. I had no one to assist me, but I survived it all. My baby and I survived. Dennis one day never addressed Elizabeth as his daughter. He also transferred the hatred he had for me to Elizabeth. But I knew I had to be strong for my daughter's sake. I couldn't cry any longer because Elizabeth would cry whenever he saw me crying. I was tired of everything. I couldn't even buy diapers for my baby. Things were that tough. Dennis refused to put our daughter in school. When Elizabeth was 3 years old, I begged Dennis to at least put her in one of the cheapest schools around, but he said he didn't have any money to spare. This was someone that had a charity organization for less privileged children, but here he was saying he didn't have any money to spare for his daughter's education. At that moment, it felt as if I had failed my daughter. I couldn't believe my daughter might end up like me. If I don't do something, I wished I had little money to use and enroll Elizabeth in school, but I had none. Dennis stopped me from working. One time I got a job at a beauty store and Dennis showed up and made a scene at the store. After that day he warned me never to go work ever again. Dennis always maltreated Elizabeth. He got angry anytime he saw her. Dennis made the house hell for us. We couldn't even breathe well anytime he was around. Fear always gripped us every time we heard the sound of his car. We always tiptoe around the house cause you never know what you will do and Dennis will get mad. I always dreamt about leaving, but I had nowhere to go. My dad would not accept me because he is scared of what Dennis would do. If my mother was alive, I'm sure she would have damned all consequences and saved me from this abuser. I knew I wouldn't even be in that kind of situation in the first place if my mother was still alive. I'm a mother and I know I can go above and beyond for my child. I might be called a wicked person for saying this, but when Dennis fell sick and was brought home by one of his side chick, I felt relieved. I rushed him to the hospital. After a series of tests, the doctor told me Dennis was down with cancer. Fortunately for him, the cancer was in an early stage and that he needed a bone marrow transplant. I was confused. I didn't understand what he was saying, so he decided to break it down for me. He told me my daughter needed to get tested. If her bone marrow matches with Dennis, then she would have to undergo a surgery to save her father's life. Over my dead body, I shouted, I would never put my child through that pain, not for a worthless man. Dennis doesn't deserve that kind of charity from Elizabeth. He was never a good father to her. How could I let my poor daughter go through a life-changing surgery just to save a man that never considered her as a daughter? Dennis was never a good father to Elizabeth. He doesn't know anything about Elizabeth. Let me shock you guys, Dennis doesn't even know his daughter's name. He always addressed her as A. I couldn't believe what happened to me was happening to my child. We both never experienced the love of a father. I called Dennis' parents and informed them about Dennis' condition. His parents arrived and they were devastated. His parents loved me, but they were scared of Dennis. They couldn't do much for me. Everyone was scared of him, even his own parents. He wasn't a good son, neither was he a good father and husband. He was rude to everyone, even his own parents. He didn't have any iota of respect for them. His mom wanted to visit me when I gave birth, but he refused. He never allowed her to come and assist me. There was a time I reported to his parents that he was maltreating me. His parents called him to advise him. He got angry and ended the call. He stopped sending money to them for a whole year. Truth be told, I was very happy to see Dennis in that condition. If for anything, I was happy he could no longer abuse me anymore. He was helpless. I was happy seeing him fighting for his life. I was having fun with the whole situation. I couldn't believe what was happening. Everything felt like a dream. The same man that used to act like a semi-god is the one lying down helplessly. I didn't feel sorry for him one bit. While Dennis was sick, none of his friends or side chicks showed up at the hospital. I was the only one around taking care of him. It's true what they said, what goes around comes back around. That period was one of the best times of my life. Suddenly it felt as if I had been set free from a cage. I left Dennis at the hospital. I only visited him whenever I wanted. I was living my best life with Dennis' money until one day, I overheard Dennis making arrangements with the doctor so they would take my daughter's bone marrow without my consent. Thank goodness I came to the hospital on that fateful day. I quickly ran out of the hospital as fast as I could and ran home immediately. I took a lot of valuable things I could lay my hands on. I took gold, I took diamonds and lots of money and ran away. Yes, I abandoned my husband on his sick bed. I did it without thinking twice. I relocated with my daughter to Australia. I knew there was no way in the world Dennis would find us, that is, if he survived. Everything was going smoothly for us again, life was beginning to make sense. The first thing I did when we got to Australia was finding a good therapist for my daughter. I didn't want to raise a damaged child. Elizabeth and I had been through a lot. The money I stole from Dennis' safe was more than enough. I made sure my daughter lacked nothing. I gave her the very best. She attended the best school. I was finally able to enroll her in the school. Elizabeth was very intelligent. Everyone loved her. She was too intelligent for her age. Sometimes, I wondered if she was really my daughter. She always made straight A's in class. She was just too smart. I regretted ever marrying Dennis, but I never regretted having Elizabeth. She was the puzzle that was missing in my life. I never felt lonely after I had Elizabeth anymore. If for anything, I became stronger and started fighting to live. Elizabeth was my everything. She was my daughter, best friend, father, mother, husband. She was the best thing that ever happened to me. I think God decided to compensate for my pain. That's why He gave me the best daughter in the whole world. While in Australia, I also started schooling. You know, I never finished college. While my mates were in school learning, I was at home doing chores. I was in college before my dad made me get married to Dennis. Dennis promised my dad I would continue my schooling, but he never fulfilled that promise. He stopped me from schooling immediately after marriage. I went to school and graduated. I studied law in one of the prestigious schools and graduated with good results. I started practicing law professionally and I became one of the best lawyers in town. I never lost any cases. I was living my best life. Life was beginning to make sense again. Elizabeth and I spent 5 years in Australia. Elizabeth was 5 years when we left. Elizabeth never for once asked me about her father's whereabouts. She didn't ask me any questions. For someone that was so inquisitive, she never for once asked me any questions about why we ran away, and I was grateful for that. I never heard anything from Dennis or my father again. I didn't even know whether Dennis survived. Well, I don't care if he survived or not. I continued developing myself and my daughter. I never stopped learning. I kept acquiring more knowledge. I built myself with every resource I could lay my hands on. I was preparing myself for the war ahead. I knew we would one day go back to the States. I will have to go back and divorce Dennis so I could finally be free. Dennis and I were still married. According to the documents he made me sign, I couldn't divorce him or else I'd have to pay a hefty sum. I'm not sure those documents were even illegal, but lack of confidence never made me do the right thing. So guys, I was still married to him. So I had all the right to come claim his entire assets. Before running away, I put everything in place. I took all the important documents I could lay my hands on before running away. Leaving Dennis on the sickbed and running away with our daughter was one of the best decisions I have ever made. It gave me the opportunity to build myself. It gave me enough time to grow, enough time to fix my broken self-esteem. I was no longer the little puppet he played with it. I had become strong and independent. I was doing well for myself. While in Australia, I was just waiting for the perfect opportunity to return back to the States. I wanted to make a grand entrance. One day, while we were listening to the news, I was busy with my phone scrolling through social media when I got a text from one of my friends. She told me she got to know that Dennis survived cancer after his brother gave him his bone marrow. Anyways, it didn't matter whether he survived or not. What mattered to me was how to take everything for him. I was just waiting for the perfect opportunity. I called Elizabeth and told her to prepare that we would have to return back. She was not happy about that. She begged for us to stay there, but I told her we needed to go back to her. She needed to take over her father's property. She told me she doesn't need any of that, but I knew she didn't understand what I was saying. She was still a baby. She was just 10 years old then. I knew one day, when she is a lot older, she will thank me for that decision. I'm just doing everything possible to position her in the right place. One thing I vowed to myself was that my daughter would not go through everything I went through. I promised myself I would make her strong and independent, and that no man will ever be able to treat her the way Dennis treated me. One of the reasons Elizabeth didn't want us to leave was because she was scared. She knew how life was for us back then and how it is now. She also didn't want to lose her friends, but I assured her we would return after we secured her future. Finally, we got back to the States. Coming back to the States brought back old memories. All of a sudden, everything came flashing back at me. This very place felt uncomfortable for me. I started having a double mind. I wanted to go back to Australia. Old fears were coming back, but looking at my daughter, I had to be strong. I had to fight for my daughter's future. I didn't want to be a total failure like my dad. I refused to be a weakling. I decided to face my fears. Elizabeth and I lodged in a hotel, and I was just waiting for the right opportunity to announce my presence to Dennis. Soon the right opportunity came. The UN was hosting a ball in honor of Dennis for his humanitarian service to the less privileged. That was the perfect opportunity one had, and I took it. What do you guys think happened next? Hi guys, it's me again. So the ball was strictly by invitation, and I didn't have an invite. But I was allowed in after I told them Dennis I was a beneficiary of Dennis humanitarian service. The ball was big, all his acquaintances were present. I took a seat and sat down quietly waiting for my time. Seeing Dennis smiling from ear to ear made me furious. Here he was, my abuser, pretending and acting like a saint. When Dennis spotted me, he got scared and pulled me to the side so he could ask what I was doing there. He was very shocked to see me. I couldn't believe that I'd fallen for his tricks before and that I let myself get confused by the games he tried to play. I made myself believe so many lies. How could I think there was a document that could make me never ask for divorce? I just didn't have the courage to look for a proper lawyer to help me out in court. Now that I'm a lawyer, I know better. That's the only reason why he could trample all over me and act like he was high and mighty. I disgraced Dennis on a night he was supposed to be honored, and I don't regret it one bit. He didn't expect to see me at all, and he made sure to make that clear. He accused me of leaving him when he was in his toughest moments, only for me to come back just so I could take revenge. I didn't even need to talk before he understood why I was present. He was threatened by my presence, and it was obvious. Dennis and I spent a lot of time arguing and having a lot of back and forths. He wasn't ready to back down, and so was I. I had to tell him how much I hated him before I spat on the floor and left him standing there. I still get goosebumps anytime I think about what happened because it was hard for me to go through all that alone. Standing up to someone who hurt you before is really hard, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. I knew that the first step I had to take was to get out of the marriage. I was still legally married to him, and I didn't want it to stay that way, so I made the conscious decision to get out of the narrative without incurring any legal problems. I knew that what my father and I had been scared of before was just stupid threats. We were just poor, and that's why we didn't have the common sense to know that Dennis had just been trying to use our head. He just wanted to play mind games with us, and we fell for it. I still can't believe that there was a time in my life when I thought that I couldn't get a divorce if I wanted to. It took a much-needed break and becoming a lawyer for me to understand just how easy it was to get a divorce if I really wanted one. Ignorance can be bliss sometimes, but it takes courage to be smart. As a lawyer, I did a lot of research and knew I could divorce Dennis without paying a dime. I can even sue him for making me sign a paper under duress. The reason Dennis is scared of divorce is because he doesn't want me to get half of his property. That was why he forced me to sign a paper. Well, I'm back now, this time a lot smarter and bolder, and I'm ready to divorce him and take half of his money. I served Dennis the divorce papers. He was shocked. He reminded me of the paper he made me sign years ago, and I told him I could sue him for making me sign a document under duress. I told him it was illegal. I gave him two options: either he signed the divorce papers, or I sued him to court for making me sign a document under duress, and he might end up spending 5 years in prison. Dennis got scared. For the first time I saw fear in his eyes. I guess the thought of him losing half of his property to me humbled him. Immediately, he fell on his knees and asked me to forgive him for everything he has ever done. He asked me to give our marriage a second chance. He said he was ready to be a good husband and, most importantly, a good father. I was too smart to fall for that crocodile tears. The 20-year-old me would have fallen for his tricks, but I'm a lot smarter now. I know what he is doing. I'm very familiar with that act. It's been 5 years ever since I left Dennis, and he hasn't changed a bit. He was still as cunning and manipulative as ever. When he saw my mind was made up, he took his car keys and walked out. You guys would not believe what happened next. Dennis returned back and continued pleading, this time around with my dad. Dennis brought my dad to plead with him. I couldn't even believe my eyes, how my dad fell for his manipulation. I haven't seen my dad ever since I left for Australia 5 years ago. I couldn't understand why he decided to appear before me just like that, asking me to forgive a man that almost ruined my life. It was at that point I realized anyone can be a father, but it takes a real man to be a dad. People like Dennis and my dad have one thing in common: they were never a good father to their children. Anyways, I turned him down too. Dennis was trying to change my mind by all means possible. He went as far as getting me a new car, but I refused to be swayed by his antics. He started coming back home early. He even started taking Elizabeth out for ice cream. My innocent daughter was happy. She thought her father was beginning to love her. I knew he had not changed and was only pretending. He was only trying to change my mind. Dennis tried his best to change my mind, but when he saw my mind was made up, he decided to sign the divorce papers. He was scared of going to jail, I guess. I couldn't believe it was finally happening. The moment I have been waiting for is here. Dennis has finally signed the divorce papers, and I'm about to be free. It felt like a heavy burden had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in a while, I felt freedom. Hi guys, it's me again. I didn't know how tough divorce proceedings can be. The whole thing was exhausting. The entire divorce process was hectic. Dennis tried to buy the jury over, but he failed. I knew Dennis would not back down easily. Dennis employed the services of 3 senior lawyers. He told me I was not going to get a penny from him. He was so confident that he would win against me. Well, I was a bit scared too, who wouldn't after seeing the lawyers he employed? I was able to calm myself down and just trust the system. His lawyers tried all they could to make sure I didn't get a penny, but I'm glad, justice prevailed at last. Dennis and I finally got divorced and I got half of his property. That is, I got half of everything he owned. You guys needed to have seen him that day, he cried hot tears. I'm not exaggerating, guys, he cried like a baby that lost his candy. I also got custody of our daughter. Dennis was also asked to start paying for child support. Dennis was fighting for the custody of our daughter because he didn't want to pay for child support. After the divorce, I decided to go start all over again in another city. I relocated permanently to Chicago with Elizabeth. I sold all the houses and assets I got from Dennis. I didn't want anything that would remind me of my bitter past. I invested for my daughter's future. Dennis was still paying the child support every month, but you never can't tell what might happen tomorrow. Dennis is unpredictable. I got a job in a law firm and I became a licensed lawyer in America. Life was beginning to make sense again. I decided to further my education while working too. I kept developing myself. I made sure I gave Elizabeth the best. She attended the best school and always came out top of her class. Sometimes, I wondered what I ever did right to deserve such a beautiful and intelligent daughter. Dennis never for once visited us in Chicago, he never even asked Elizabeth, but always sent money every month. I guessed he never forgave me for taking half of his money. He went around spreading false rumors about me. He told anyone that cared to listen, how I abandoned him on his bed and ran away with our daughter, and how I came back again, to divorce him and take half of his money. Truth be told, initially it affected me, because people judged me without hearing my own side of the story. I was hurt, I wouldn't even lie. That was even one of the reasons I relocated from Los Angeles to Chicago. Dennis was hell-bent on destroying my name. As time went on, I no longer cared about what Dennis and his gossip mongers had to say about me. I ignored them, and soon enough, they got tired and frustrated. As for my dad, my stepmom kept pushing him into debt. I heard my stepsister Alora got married to an old rich man. I'm not surprised though, knowing how greedy my stepmom is. I knew she can sell off her own daughter too, just like she did with me. She is one of the most selfish beings I know. I don't even know how she sleeps at night. I mean, I'm a mother and I don't see myself doing that to my child. My dad finally got tired of her flamboyant lifestyle and sent her away. I wished he did that earlier. I wouldn't have married Dennis in the first place. But I believe everything happens for a reason. If I had not married Dennis, I wouldn't have had my daughter Elizabeth. Elizabeth is my will to live. She is my best friend and everything. I work so hard because of her. I want her to know what it means to be a strong, independent, and hard-working woman. Elizabeth finally graduated from high school. It was a proud moment for me. She dedicated her speech to me. She described me as her superhero. Dennis got married again, this time not to a naive 20-year-old girl, but to a businesswoman like him. She divorced him 3 months later. Is not everyone that could put up with what I endured in the hands of Dennis. That is my story, guys. Now I understand the saying that you never know how strong you are until being strong is the only way. Nothing prepared me for everything life threw at me, but I'm grateful for everything. The hardship I went through made me stronger, and I'm grateful I survived it all. Thanks, and